Hey guys, it's Ryan from the Melbourne Centre of Healing here. Last night we were at an event and something interesting happened. It was an interesting observation that I made and I thought that I would share. So we were at a health professional night, we had a stall there, and what we had was a blackboard, and on that blackboard was written, "What is your biggest fear?" So the idea was people write what their biggest fear is and we get a whole group of them, and it's sort of a connection exercise. It brings everyone together because people see that most of the fears that they have are shared with everyone else. Okay, we all have these similar fears. So what happened, the board was filling up. It got like maybe half full of different fears, and then there was a group of kids came up. I reckon there was about 6 of them, and they would have been the ages of probably between 3 and 6, 3 and 7, something like that. And then they sat there for the next like half an hour or so, and they were writing out what their biggest fears were. And I took real interest in that, so I went around the front and I was watching what these kids were writing as opposed to what the adults had written. And I've got a little sample here of what each of them were writing. So here's a small selection of what the kids were writing, those kids between the ages of 3 and 6. Their biggest fears: snakes, sharks, guns, needles, dogs, crocodiles, fire, falling rocks. So that's all like physical, material stuff, right? You know, things in the physical world that can actually hurt a young kid of that age, right? Now let's have a small selection of some of the fears that adults wrote. Not being enough, not being successful, not following my dreams, confined spaces, regret, being alone. So what's the difference there? The kids had written down this physical stuff in the material world that can actually physically hurt them. What the adults had written down were all pure constructs of the mind. Things that are made up by the mind, fears that aren't in essence real, but they are real because we believe they are real. And they come from a belief system. And that belief, so that fear, if your biggest fear is not being enough, then there's a belief behind it that says, I'm not enough. And what you want to do is you really want to question where that belief comes from. Because see, our whole world, our whole reality, it's made up of what we believe about the world, you know? So I believe that this is a chair. That's what it's called. And I'm sure a lot of people share that same belief with me. Someone who is in China who speaks no English, they're going to have a different belief around what this thing is called. But to me, it's chair. Okay? And how I created that belief was there was an event in my life when I was younger where I was told this is things called a chair. And what happened? I agreed with that. I agreed with that and made it part of my belief system. So something very neutral, like this being a chair, now a belief is formed, whether it's the belief of this or I'm not enough or I'm not good enough. And what you want to ask yourself is, where did this come from? Where did these beliefs, these fears that I have that seem to hold me back from doing what I'm really meant to do in my life, where did they come from? And what we found, it's really these singular events in our life. And what happened, we've decided this and we've agreed with someone else's interpretation or our interpretation of the event, and now we're living this out in our adulthood, and it's not serving us. Maybe there was an event in kindergarten and you were bullied, okay? And you decided in that moment, I'm not enough. Maybe there was an event, your father left the family when you were 3 years old. He was left and never to be seen again. And you decided that I'm not good enough. Maybe you were in primary school and you failed your times tables test and your teacher told you that you were never going to amount to nothing. And you decided, I'm not good enough. You really want to question where these things come from, because they come from these singular events. And when you start to have these memories and maybe find out where this was coming from, you can ask a few simple questions. The first one is, what's the truth of that event? Okay? What's the actual truth of it? Is it true that you are not enough? Or is something else the reality? You can look back on it with fresh eyes of today. That kid that was getting bullied, is it absolute truth that he's not enough? Nah, not really. He was getting bullied, okay? That's what happens. You get young kids in packs and they find someone to pick on. Normally someone that's different. Does being different make you not good enough? No way. Being different's fucking awesome. And it becomes a benefit after you leave school. What about if your dad left you when you were 3 years old? He left the family. Is it absolute truth that that meant that you're not enough? Or was your dad battling his own demons? Did he think that he wasn't enough to look after a family? Was he maybe an alcoholic? Did he have these own battles and these challenges that he was trying his best to deal with, and it wasn't a reflection on you? With the primary school teacher, just because you flunked a times tables test, does that mean you're not enough? Of course not. And she shouldn't have acted the way she did, telling you you weren't going to amount to anything. But she probably was having a horrible day at work. She was probably overworked and underpaid, right? So the truth is, you are enough in those events. But what happens when we have this strong emotional reaction and we agree with whatever that perception is at the time, we can create that belief. Once we create a belief, it will stick with us unless we go back and do the work to change it. And that belief that I'm not enough, it's a protection mechanism for that 3-year-old, that 5-year-old, that 7-year-old. It's trying to protect him. But the problem is once we create that belief and we live it out when we're 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years old, it's not a protection mechanism anymore. It's a limiting belief that holds us back from doing whatever it is we want to do in our life. And it creates so much fear in us that it stops us doing those things. So the second thing you can ask, after you've asked whether that's absolute truth, you can ask, is this event still happening to me? Because the truth is, whatever that event was, it only happened once. Only once. Yet because we have this belief now, it's affecting us over and over and over again. So try doing that. Try having a real contemplation, a meditation. Think about where these things came from. If you think you're not enough, if you think that life's hard, if you think that you're not worthy, any of these, if you think you're not confident, if you think you can't do public speaking, whatever it is, try and ask yourself, where did this come from? Where did this come from? And was that event, go back into that event, was that absolute truth, that belief that I made? And you'll find out that it wasn't. But it was just your perception at the time and trying to protect that inner child of yours. And the second thing you can say to yourself is, that happened once and it's not happening to me anymore. And then watch how much your life can open up and how much more freedom you can have when you can be free of these belief systems that are limiting your life. So the basic message is learn from kids, right? Because I was fascinated watching them write on the blackboard last night. Absolutely fascinated. That's all from me today, guys. Have a beautiful weekend. Peace out.